Once there was a gentleman who married, for his second wife, the proudest and most haughty woman that was ever seen. She had, by a former husband, 2 daughters of her own humor, who were, indeed, exactly like her in all things. Additionally, he had a young daughter by another wife who inherited her mother's unparalleled goodness and temper's sweetness. Her mother was the world's best creature. The mother-in-law began to show her true colors as soon as the wedding ceremonies were over. She was unable to bear this pretty girl's good qualities, which made her daughters appear even more odious. She put her to work doing the worst housework. She searched the tables, dishes, and other items, and scrubbed the chambers of the misses and her daughters of the madam. She slept in a dreadful garret on a filthy straw bed, while her sisters slept in beautiful rooms with inlaid floors, modern beds, and looking glasses that were so large that they could see themselves from head to toe. The poor child endured everything patiently, but she was afraid to tell her father because he would have yelled at her, because his wife was his only authority. She used to go into the chimney corner and sit among cinders and ashes after she finished her work, earning her the nickname Cinderwench. However, the youngest, who was not as belligerent as the oldest, referred to her as Cinderella. Nevertheless, Cinderella was 100 times more attractive than her sisters, despite the fact that they were always dressed to the nines. A ball was given by the king's son, and everyone who was fashionable was invited to it. Our young ladies were also invited because they stood out among the elite. They were overjoyed to receive this invitation and were incredibly busy selecting gowns, petticoats, and head coverings. Cinderella faced a new challenge with this, because she ironed the linens of her sisters and plaited their ruffles. They only talked about what they should wear the entire day. The oldest replied, "I will wear my red velvet suit with French trimming for my part." The youngest replied, "And I shall have my usual petticoat, but then, to make up for that, I'll do my diamond stomacher and gold-flowered manteau, which are far from the most common outfits in the world." They hired the best tire woman they could find to put on their headdresses and adjust their double pinners. Mademoiselle de la Poche provided them with red brushes and patches. In addition, Cinderella was summoned to consult with them regarding all of these matters because she had excellent ideas, advised them always for the best, and offered her services to dress their heads, which they were willing to do. They told her as she was doing this, "Cinderella, if you could go to the ball, wouldn't you be happy?" "Alas," she stated, "you only mock me, it is not appropriate for me to travel there." They responded, "Thou art in the right of it, a cinderwench at a ball would make everyone giggle." They were almost 2 days without food, so much were they transported with joy, but Cinderella was very good and dressed them perfectly. Anyone else would have dressed their heads incorrectly. In an effort to be laced up close, they broke more than a dozen laces, and they were constantly looking through their looking glass. The happy day finally arrived. Cinderella followed them to the court as long as she could, and when she lost sight of them, she broke down in tears. When she saw her weeping, her godmother inquired about the situation. "I wish I could," as in, I wish I could, due to her sobbing in tears, she was unable to speak for the remainder. She had a fairy godmother who told her, "Thou wishest thou couldst go to the ball, isn't that true?" With a deep sigh, Cinderella exclaimed, "Yes." Her godmother offered the advice, "Well, be but a good girl, and I will contrive that thou shalt go. Run into the garden, and bring me a pumpkin," she told her as she led her into her chamber. Unable to comprehend how this pumpkin could force Cinderella to attend the ball, she went straight to the finest she could find and presented it to her godmother. Her godmother scooped out everything inside, leaving only the rind. She then used her wand to strike it, and the pumpkin transformed into a fine coach covered in gold. After that, she went into her mousetrap and found 6 alive mice. she told Cinderella to open the trapdoor a little and gave each mouse a little tap with her wand as it went out, turning it into a beautiful horse. The 6 horses were all of a beautiful mouse-colored dapple gray color. In search of a coachman, Cinderella declares, "I will go and see, if there is never a rat in a rat trap, we may make a coachman of him." The reply from her godmother was, "Thou art in the right, pay attention." The trap that Cinderella handed to her contained 3 enormous rats. The fairy chose the one with the largest beard, and after touching him with her wand, she transformed him into a fat, jovial coachman with the sharpest eyes ever seen. Following that, she told her, "You will find 6 lizards behind the watering pot, bring them to me if you go back into the garden." Her godmother immediately transformed them into 6-foot men, skipping up immediately behind the coach in liveries adorned with gold and silver and clinging to one another, as though they had never done anything else. Cinderella was then informed by the fairy, "Well, you can see here a set that's ready to go to the ball. Are you dissatisfied with it?" "Oh, yes," she yelled, "but must I travel there in these filthy rags?" When her godmother just touched her with her wand, her clothes instantly changed to gold and silver with jewels all over them. She then presented her with the most stunning pair of glass slippers in the world. She got out of her coach, dressed as she was, but most of all, her godmother told her not to stay until after midnight, saying that if she did, the coach would turn back into a pumpkin, her horses would turn into mice, her coachman would turn into a rat, her footmen would turn into lizards, and her clothes would return to how they were before. She made a promise to her godmother that she would leave the ball before midnight, then she drives away, barely able to contain her joy. When the king's son heard that a great, unknown princess was coming, he ran out to meet her. As she emerged from the coach, he extended his hand to her and led her into the ball amid the crowd. They stopped dancing immediately, and the violins stopped playing because everyone was so focused on the singular beauty of the unknown newcomer, that there was a profound silence. After that, nothing more than a muddled noise of, "Ha! How attractive she is! Ha! How attractive she is!" Even though he was old, the king couldn't help but look at her and softly tell the queen that he hadn't seen a creature quite like her in a long time. All the women were busy thinking about her clothes and headdress, which they might make the next day using the same pattern if they could find such high-quality materials and skilled hands to make. She was led to the most dignified seat by the king's son, who then invited her to dance with him. They all admired her more and more as she danced so gracefully. The young prince ate nothing of the delicious meal because he was so preoccupied gazing at her. She went to her sisters and sat down next to them. She showed them 1,000 civilities and gave them some of the oranges and citrons the prince had given her, which surprised them a lot because they didn't know her. When Cinderella heard the clock strike 11 3/4, she hurried away as quickly as she could as a courtesy to the company while she was amusing her sisters. She ran to her godmother when she got home, and after she thanked her, she said she could not help but sincerely wish she could go to the ball the following day because the king's son had wanted her. When Cinderella's 2 sisters knocked on the door while she was eagerly recounting what had transpired at the ball, she ran and unlocked it. "How long have you been here?" she screamed, gaping, rubbing her eyes, and stretching as if she had just been jolted awake. However, ever since they left her house, she had no desire to sleep. One of her sisters said, "Thou wouldst not have been tired with it if thou hadst been at the ball." The most beautiful princess ever seen by mortal eyes, the finest, arrived there. She gave us oranges and citrons, and she showed us 1,000 civilities. The situation seemed very unimportant to Cinderella. Indeed, she inquired about the princess's name. However, they informed her that they were unaware of it and that the king's son was extremely concerned about her and would divulge her identity to the entire world. Smiling, Cinderella responded to this. "Therefore, she must be very beautiful. How content you've been. Why did I not see her?" "Dear Miss Charlotte, I would appreciate it if you could lend me your yellow daily outfit." "Yes, of course." Miss Charlotte yelled, "Lend my clothes to a soiled cinderwench like you. I ought to be foolish." Indeed, Cinderella had anticipated such a response and was delighted by the rejection. If her sister had granted her request in jest, she would have been cruelly punished. Cinderella attended the ball the following day along with her sisters and was dressed more magnificently than before. The king's son never left her side and never stopped praising her. She was so enthralled by all of this that she completely forgot what her godmother had advised her, so that when she finally realized it was 12, she thought it was only 11. She then stood up and swiftly fled the scene. The prince then followed, but he was unable to catch her. The prince carefully took one of her glass slippers that she had left behind. She arrived home exhausted and dressed in her filthy old clothes. All she had left of her finery was a pair of slippers, which she had dropped. At the palace gate, the guards were asked if they hadn't witnessed the princess leaving. Who spoke? The only person they had seen go out was a young girl who was very mean-spirited and looked more like a poor country wench than a gentlewoman. Cinderella questioned the two sisters when they got back from the ball, if they had been cleverly diverted and the lovely lady was present. They advised her, yes, but when the clock struck 12, she ran away so quickly that she dropped one of her tiny, most exquisite glass slippers, which the king's son had taken up, that all he had done at the ball was stare at her, and that he was absolutely in love with the beautiful woman who owned the glass slipper. They were right when they said that. For a few days after the king's son announced via trumpet that he would marry the woman whose foot the slipper perfectly fit, his employees began to test it on the princesses, duchesses, and the entire court, but to no avail. It was given to the two sisters, who tried their hardest to put their foot in the slipper but were unable to do so. Laughing to them, Cinderella, who was aware of her slipper and saw everything, said, "Let me check to see if it fits me." Her sisters burst out laughing and got into a conversation with her. The man who was supposed to try on the slipper gave Cinderella a serious look and said, thinking she was very handsome, it was only that she should try and that he had instructed everyone to participate in the trial. He forced Cinderella to sit down, and when he put the slipper on her foot, he found that it fit her like wax and went on easily. When Cinderella pulled the other slipper out of her pocket and put it on her foot, the astonishment felt by her two sisters was even greater. After that, her godmother came in and made Cinderella's clothes richer and more beautiful than any she had ever had before by touching them with her wand. And now, her two sisters realized that she was the lovely woman they'd seen at the ball. They threw themselves at her feet to ask for forgiveness for everything they had done to her. As she embraced them, Cinderella wept as she took them up, that she sincerely desired their love for her always and forgave them. Dressed as she was taken to the young prince. He married her a few days later because he thought she was even more charming than before. Cinderella, who was just as beautiful as she was, gave her two sisters rooms in the palace and matched them with two powerful courtiers on the same day.